You are watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of the music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room.
Hi, welcome to The Producer's Room. Once again, we are on the West Coast here in Portland, Oregon today with Tucker Martine. Tucker, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Dave.
And kind of continuing our West Coast run of interviews. I'm really excited to be up here in the Pacific Northwest. Tucker's name is, everyone around here seems to have some respect for your studio and what you're doing here. Tucker has produced and engineered albums for groups such as R.E.M, My Morning Jacket, Modest Mouse, The Decemberists, Sufjan, Beth, Orton, Bill Frisell, Spoon, Neko, Grandaddy, Death Cab for Cutie, Veirs, Obscura, and the list just keeps going on and on. So it's a great list. I keep looking at these records going, I love that record. So, and then in 2010, Pace Magazine included you in their list of the 10 best producers of the decade. So my question is, does that expire in 2020?
I hope not.
Okay.
Maybe they'll renew it.
Renew your license. And Tucker's here at Flora Recording, like I said, in Portland, Oregon. But your clients seem to travel from all over the world to come here to Portland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I don't know if that's mostly because they just want an excuse to visit.
Right. No. It's a beautiful,
but yeah.
Beautiful place. And like you said, the tap water is good. And
right? Yeah.
So
coffee's good.
There's a lot of stuff out there on you, and so I don't want to repeat. I never like to repeat what's out there. I like to kind of dig deeper and talk about the creative process, because this show, The Producer's Room, is about the creative process and not just the gear. We can talk about the gear, but it's about, why do we use the gear? Why do we turn that knob? What color are we going for? What image are we going for? And by the way, I want to showcase some of your gear later on, but let's first talk about just you and some of your background. But my first question off the bat is, and this may be something you have to think about for a minute, but why Tucker Martine? Like, if you say that name, why do you think your clients gravitate to you? What do you think they are expecting or hoping from you and your studio and your assets? Assets, that sounds so businessy, but what you work with, your creative palette here, as opposed to another producer, because you've attracted so many artists, so many top quality artists. I'm just curious, what do you think about your creative process attracts those artists?
It's a great question. It's one that I usually try to just not think about because I don't necessarily know, but right. I just know if I just keep doing what it is that I like to do. Yeah. It seems like someone else comes along and would like me to do that again. I like to think I have a reputation for being really considerate of the artist's vision. Mm-hmm. For starters, like, I'm not so heavy-handed that I'm just going to mow down whatever it is they're trying to get at. I want to really pull out of them what they want, so I try to choose projects where I, have a ton of respect for the artist and feel like they have a unique sensibility and have some kind of vision to begin with that, I'll help expound upon. Sure. But and just try to highlight their strengths. Sonically, while I'm not really thinking about what my style is, I feel like there's people tell me there's kind of a cinematic or kind of a three-dimensional quality often to records that I work on, and that is kind of something I seek from sitting up here. I really want to find depth of field and width and height and contrast of kind of dirty and clean and pretty and ugly and
well, I like that, actually. So take a step back, those contrasts, right? So you're consciously always thinking about those things.
Yeah, I am. Even, I guess, in a performance, if I feel like a song is getting a
Right.
treatment that's just too sweet, it's just
Right.
all
Right.
pretty. You know, it's like, well, it's not really that pretty unless that prettiness is in contrast to something
Yeah,
else.
that's true.
You know.
Like, for instance, when I listen to the Camera Obscura records, but especially the one you did, you know, you think of the voice as so pretty and sweet, but you have to find an element in there to maybe dirty up, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe it just means in the instrumental, it's time to
Right.
turn the Princeton up to 10.
Yeah, I got you.
Or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you know, you bring up the dirty drum mic.
Sure, sure.
Or whatever it is. It's a little bit more believable to me if there's a little bit of each. And
That's
same
cool.
with heavy music, you know.
Right.
I rarely get asked to work on really heavy music, but when I do, I mean, I love heavy music, but I also, you know, if there's anything melodic to be had, I'd like to highlight that.
out, yeah.
And
That's cool.
I think that, you know, the
Yeah.
contrast is definitely something satisfying for me.
And later on, I want to get into your use of ambience because I find it fascinating. You're one of the I would consider the specialist in that contrast, and I think that ties in. But let's take a step back before, and that's the first question I wanted to ask because I think it introduces you to everybody. But let's take a step back. You are from Nashville, and in some of your interviews I've read, you say, you know, you grew up watching your father, who is a renowned songwriter, and I can't get the Glade commercial out of my head, but I'm sure he's done well off of that. So, but look up his father and do your research there. Written songs for Elvis and the lot, correct?
Yeah.
And so you grew up watching him work in Nashville, and you said, you know, you went to some of these demos sessions with the musicians, and you were just kind of amazed it didn't even sound like a demo because of the quality of the Nashville musicians. And
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what a demo really was.
Right,
probably,
right.
I didn't really understand it probably till sometime in my early 20s. But
yeah,
and then even today, you know,
right,
often people are just chasing the demo. So,
Right.
And with how available the equipment is and stuff.
yeah.
I wonder if, you know, how necessary
If that
demos
line,
are.
if that line is still there, yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
But he was doing the sort of demos, you know, he would write a song and he wanted to pitch the song to
Sure.
artists. So they often, you know, he wanted to spell out a little bit, fill in a little bit of the picture and not just, you know,
Yeah.
have it be acoustic guitar and vocal demo. If he thought, oh, this is a great song for, you know, Reba McEntire.
Sure.
Well, let's get a demo that's kind of in that vein.
Yeah. So
So when her producer hears it, it's not too hard for him
He
to
did
imagine.
have a Reba cut, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah, that's what I was, I remember that, yeah. So you're walking into these studios, what era is this, late 70s or early 80s?
Late 70s, early
or mid
to
80s?
mid 80s
Okay.
too, yeah.
And any particular studios that stick in your mind, or are they still there? I know a lot of them gone nowadays because of the condos on Music Row. But,
I know. A lot of them I didn't know.
Yeah.
At the time, I just wasn't keeping track
Sure,
of
sure.
names, and in many cases I was too young to be
Yeah.
oriented. But I know that, let's see, the Creative Workshop,
Okay,
which
yeah.
that had a different name.
Yeah, I don't know
Right.
if that's actually still.
Yeah.
The building may be there.
The building's still there.
Yeah.
It's right next to Blackbird.
Okay.
Buzz Cason's place.
Cool.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I definitely remember being there, and then the B studio at Sound Emporium, which I think Jack Clement owned one time.
Yeah, that was.
I remember
was.
being in there, and then, you know, a lot of them, as we got more into the '80s, were kind of guys' home studios.
Sure,
So you
sure.
had more of the guys who's
beginning
like,
of the movement,
who plays
yeah.
everything,
Yep.
and you just come over
That's cool.
in a few hours. He'll
So speaking of that though, even taking a step back and seeing all these guys in a room, obviously that seems to be more your mentality when you're tracking here, is that, you know, people face to face. And when I think of like LA, obviously I don't think of that, you know, but you brought some of that organicness from Nashville of people playing in a room and all that to what you do here. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of learned through trial and error that that I preferred that in a lot of cases.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of music I love that's very much about constructing from the ground up, but when it's a band or, in many cases a songwriter, and you ultimately want it to sound like a band played the song, there's often no better way to get that than to have an actual band play the song and, learn to embrace all the quirks that came with that performance.
Sure.
Assuming, that's part of the art, is knowing which one had the good quirks and which one was just screwed up.
And that's actually, I think that leads into the next thing I was going to ask you, because you were talking about, the artists that you work with and how you choose the artists that you work with. So let's take a step back. Let's say that artist Z walks in. There may be a new artist, by the way.
Yeah,
Artist Z that comes in and says, thank you, Tucker. Let's make a record. Let's talk about what I would call in Nashville pre-production. I don't know what you guys call here, but just getting ready for everything. I mean, are you picking the songs with them? Are you taking outside songs? Are you being the song editor? How do you do the instrumentation? All the above.
It's totally project specific.
Okay.
There are projects where, I'll get a big pile of songs and they would love nothing more than for me to choose them.
Written by the artist?
Yes, written by the artist.
Right. So most of the artists you work with are self-contained as far as...
Pretty much entirely.
And so I just have to get past some of our Nashville isms that we bring,
Right.
But, yeah.
So, every artist is kind of open to a different level of feedback about song choices and song editing. Every once in a while there'll be somebody who's just, these are the songs,
right,
and they are thoroughly written.
Not even arrangement, like let's move the bridge here, or let's put in an instrumental section. Or
I'm just to kind of cover the extremes of the spectrum that I've encountered. There have been people that don't want to have that conversation.
Okay.
It still might come up if I feel really strongly.
Sure.
And, give them a chance to make their case for it, because that's what we're here to do, right? It's like to hopefully just everybody make the best thing possible. But, usually 9 times out of 10, people are just, they came here for a sounding board and they're willing to try anything.
Sure.
And that's the type of environment that I try to create here is, willingness. I'll try. I have total respect for anyone. By the time we're all here, it's because we all have mutual respect, and I'll try anything they want to try, and hope they'll try anything I'm up for.
Sure.
And if we're not all psyched, we just move on.
Right.
No big harm.
So you got the songs. Let's say at this point, you move on to. Are you doing charts? Are you doing sketches of instrumentation? Because what I find interesting, I guess, coming from the Nashville world is we have it down to our science. We get the number chart and we get that. And here it's a little bit more organic and it seems like, at least.
Yeah.
And
well, if it's kind of a session player situation,
right,
there usually will be charts.
Okay.
Though there are certain players that I know that just do great without charts, and they'll probably listen to the demos a handful of times. I just kind of trust the people that I usually choose to work with to know how much time they want to spend with it.
Yeah.
Because some of them really feel like their initial impulses are going to be the strongest.
Yes.
And if they blow that like 2 months before the session, then by the time they get here, they're maybe just sort of trying to recreate a feeling they once had or something.
So just let them react. So sometimes you just play the work tape and they go for it. Right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Often that conversation about the form of the song, the real conversation might happen like right here. If I have a demo, I'll just play it while everyone's sitting here because we're about to start on this song, and then I'll say it really feels like that last chorus could go a second time, and everyone's like, totally, I was thinking the same thing, or whatever it is. But I like to leave a lot of decisions to be made here in the room. Not song choices.
Sure.
And if a song clearly needs a lot of work, that all needs to get discussed in advance. But I try to, if I'm confident in the songs and I'm confident in the musicians, I think there's something really, really productive about.
So do you have
choices?
And obviously we can read your records on some of the guys you like to use, but do you have a set crew of do they exist in the Northwest? It's hard for me to, because in Nashville it's like you throw a rock and you hit a session guitar player or a session drummer, but your crew, do you have to fly in guys or are they up here?
I do. When the budget's there, I do often fly in guys or gals, and I'm not crazy about that because I know there are so many great players here, but once you've sort of what you're going to get, that
proven commodity, and done
creatively
for you in the past,
that you see eye to eye, and that just personalities are going to work together, and that they're going to be psyched, because I want not only the right players, but I want everyone to be psyched to be here. I don't want anyone for it to just be like the job they have to get done that day. So, like I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of songs with Roseanne Cash, and she let me choose the musicians, and I thought, they're great musicians here. I should be able to just do it with people in town, but I didn't want to kind of try out working with new people.
Yep. No, I hear you.
You kind of get one shot at that. So, Sebastian Steinberg played bass. He came up from L.A. and her longtime drummer Dan Reeser, who I'd always loved and wanted to work with. We roped him in. I thought it'd be great for her to have one person at least that was familiar. And he just crushed it. And but Rob Berger played keys, and he lives in Portland now. He moved from New York.
Okay, wow.
Yeah,
cool.
Rob's great.
Well, I mean, you seem to make it work, and then of course you have the self-contained bands that you. We always hear those stories sometimes of the self-contained bands, but just sending someone off to lunch and then bringing someone else in. But I'm sure at the level you work in, everybody's pretty proficient at what they do, and
Yeah. I mean, we usually in those situations we have to move pretty quickly. Getting up 2 or 3 songs a day, but it works great. You just get that energy, and when everyone in the room listens back and is psyched, you pretty much know you have something.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're here with Tucker, and we'll be right back. See you guys soon. Cool.
What would a degree from Belmont University mean to you?
I'm so proud of you, darling.
Maybe it's time you found out.
Thanks, Dad. I can't believe I finally did it.
Belmont University Adult Degree Program. Finish what you started.
Ryan, how does it feel to be the Predators' 7th man?
It's an amazing feeling.
What do you think the coaching staff saw in you?
Well, I had this jersey.
Could you tell us a bit about your background?
Well, I've been playing hockey almost daily since '97 on a bunch of different gaming platforms.
Have you given much thought to your training regimen?
I think I'll start training.
Be the 7th man. Learn how you can get an official Predators jersey in Nashville Predators banking at Fifth Third Bank, the official currency of Smashville.
Welcome back to this episode of The Producer's Room. And once again, we're here with Tucker Martine in Portland, Oregon at Flora Studios. Is that correct?
Flora Recording
Flora
and Playback.
Recording. Oh, okay, wow. And do you guys have T-shirts or anything?
Actually, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
on your
check.
way out.
What is the website for Flora?
It's florarecording.com.
Now, does most of your work come through labels, or do you have a manager? Or, I mean, let's say if a band's watching right now in Nashville, I said we'd love to work with Tucker, but we don't know how to get a hold of him or that kind of stuff.
The website has a contact for myself and my manager.
Okay, awesome.
And yeah, my manager, he's not necessarily drumming up the work for me, but he's just kind of helping
with the business
coordinate
stuff.
everything once it gets going. Yeah.
Cool, because that would be a nice little retreat. Just come up to Portland, and maybe that's why people like it's like relaxing, get away from the hustle and bustle. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about some of the pre-production, and then we moved to the tracking, and I guess you kind of answered the next question I have already. I was going to ask you, how many takes are you aiming for in a day? obviously it depends on the project and the budget and all that, but obviously, I mean, are you at least a song a day, I would assume, but...
Yeah, you know, to go back to, say, the Rosie and Cash thing,
Yeah.
I mean, we had everybody for 4.5 days, and, you know, so we had to keep a pretty good pace, but if I think about, say, a My Morning Jacket record or even a Decemberists record that I've been able to work on, we had the luxury, if needed, to, you know, spend a couple days trying to get a song.
Cool.
Or, you know, come back to a song later and try to beat it.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand how and why one could take, you know, a couple days trying to get an elusive song.
Right.
Especially if the band hasn't been touring it.
Well,
and you know, just learning it.
Going back to the session musician thing, and you said a lot of times they figure it out on the spot. With the self-contained bands, are they doing any rehearsal, pre-production before they come in, or are they just going from scratch like with parts?
Well, yeah, it's funny because now that I think about it, the Decemberists, almost all the records that we've made, they did not rehearse any of it.
Wow.
Before they came in, and that was their choice.
Yeah.
And the same with the two My Morning Jacket records.
Wow.
I think as time's gone on, James, the leader of My Morning Jacket, has just become more and more fond of just capturing that initial impulse.
That's cool.
You know, sometimes what that means is you spend 3 days actually trying to figure a song out.
Right.
And that can be frustrating for him because he's going for live vocals and he's getting takes that he's happy with, you know, within the first hour or two, and everybody else is like, I've just finished learning the form and the chords.
Yeah, I see.
So that's a tricky thing about that. But you know, now that you're asking me about it, I'm realizing how much I work on projects that haven't had a lot of rehearsal coming into them, by design, by choice, for whatever reason.
I mean, even in Nashville, it's funny. Some guys will rehearse the session guys a lot, like you hear about those things with back in the day with Steely Dan, where they would rehearse, and then let the musicians forget about it, and then come back and do a take. You know, or like Paul Worley's one guy in Nashville that he'll do 2 weeks of rehearsal before they come in, and you have the guys that are just on the fly. So I think it's interesting to see the spectrum of you know, how guys are doing that. So you get the basic tracks, and then this is an old school term, but the sweetening, the overdubs. When people are gone, one thing I've noticed about your records, and I'm just actually going to come out and ask you, is I love your string sections.
Oh, thanks.
So do you have a particular go-to string section here, or do you farm that out? Do you send it somewhere and go, hey, do my strings and arrange them, and it comes back? Or?
I do both.
Okay.
When the budget fits and it seems musically appropriate, I've sent stuff to Stephen Barber in Austin, who's an arranger.
Okay.
And there's this fantastic string quartet there called Tosca Strings that he works with, and whom I've met, and just like they're incredible players. It's 4 women, and they have this church that they track it in. And he'll just kind of play me his ideas over the phone on the piano, and kind of he's got this great, really imaginative, kind of vivid way of describing what he's hearing, and we'll kind of hash it out so there aren't too many surprises by the time I get it. But
wow, that's cool.
So that's in the minority of cases. But there are these 3 ladies here in town that now have given themselves a name called the Bizarre Star Strings. And I love working with them. They don't arrange anything in advance. When I know that it's going to work to just figure it out on the fly, I bring them in, and between them and myself and the artist, you know, we kind of know where we want it, what sort of role we want the strings to play, and we just hash it out. Like they'll sit right here, the artist might have their guitar, and we just we talk it through for maybe 20 minutes, and then they go in and start knocking it out.
I mean, just to hear, I love to hear strings, and it seems like they get fewer and fewer with this dwindling budgets, and you got a lot of cool string arrangements on your stuff. And then what about, like, because I know your background is in the whole, you know, found sounds and, some of the ambient stuff. Are you ever layering any of that stuff after the band's gone home, or
I love doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems, if I feel like the artist is after that, sometimes they make it clear from the beginning. They're like, I love all the weird shit that you've done.
Right.
And other times somebody just really loves some record that I worked on that maybe didn't have as much of that, and I have to keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, kind of at the root of my interest in recording is just manipulating the medium and, just kind of the things that can happen by using things wrong, or whatever tape loops, or the reverb gets patched back into itself, and you find the feedback spot where it's just kind of singing just right. But short of actively chasing that stuff on certain records, I do always look for great accidents to embrace.
Right. That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so we talked about, I'm just going through the process in my head, and we're also on the topic of Roseanne's album, but you probably haven't gotten to the mixing stage. But you just had mentioned that you farmed out a record. I say farmed out, I don't know if that's a great word, but sent a record to Andrew Scheps to mix recently. But it seems like you've done most of your mixing here.
Yeah.
On most of your projects.
I do. I pretty much always mix my projects, but that was an exception.
The budget allowed or the label said.
Yeah, and the label was really psyched on him.
Yeah, that's cool. And you go with the flow, right?
Yeah.
And, so how do you see the forest for the trees? That's the only problem with, some of the stuff I've worked on in the past is like, you've heard the song so many times, but if you've been a part of the pre-production and then tracked it and now you're mixing it, how do you remain objective during that? Or are you mixing as you go on?
Question. Well, I do definitely do that. I'm always trying little mix things, even as we're tracking, parallel compressors.
Sure.
Like, oh, this song really, the drums really love the TG1. All right. And then whenever we're moving on from a song, I make a rough mix, and we take pictures of the console and the outboard gear. Yeah. So I can always get back to that if I check that rough mix out. And
are you printing things as you go along, or not necessarily? It's just
like effects and stuff? You mean? Not necessarily. Okay. I mean...
Or if you had that parallel drum compression and you loved it, would you just take a picture of it, or would you
in the case
record
of compression, parallel compression, I would probably just take pictures.
Okay.
But if it's a treatment, like at the Space Echo on the piano or something, and we're just like, oh, that's the thing, then absolutely print that. Because the Space Echo is going to sound different tomorrow than it did today.
Sure, exactly.
But the photo method has worked well for...
That's cool.
So I do that for every rough mix and every final mix, and it works great for recalling. I mean, it takes 15 minutes or so to get the recall going, but...
So then, if you're mixing while you go along, is it then when you actually come down and sit down to mix it, is it a day process per song, or it really just depends?
I like, again,
then revisions.
Sometimes I have to do quicker than that, but I love having I like having a day for a mix and then sleep with it overnight and make some fine tunes in the morning.
Wake up in the morning and then that's good. Just kind of fresh ears.
Yeah. And also sometimes I'm sending it to an artist and who knows where, and it just gives everyone time to live with it.
But when you get to your level of some of the bands you're working with, it seems like there's so many cooks in the kitchen. You got management, you got A&R, you got the band, all giving their feedback on the mix. How do you deal with that? I just would think that's sometimes a nightmare.
I feel fortunate that I definitely have dealt with nightmare situations, but for the most part, I work with artists that are pretty autonomous. Yeah. Even bands, the Decemberists or My Morning Jacket, who've been on major labels, they just have a clear arrangement with their label and with their management that, everyone stays out of the process.
Well, you're a lucky guy.
I'm very lucky, and when it doesn't go that way, I remember how lucky I was those other times.
Right.
But I think there's been this era where. There were all these indie bands that did really well for themselves on kind of independent circumstances, and then they got picked up by big labels, and they just said at the signing, they're like, look, you like us for what we do. We're going to keep doing things this way, but we'll have your support behind us.
Micromanage us,
Yeah.
So that's the mix process, and I, like I said, I want to maybe cover some outboard gear later, but
can I just add?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
but because that's like a huge thing to me. Like, so much of the art of doing this is trying to maintain some perspective. When you the deeper in you get, the less perspective you have. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of trick myself into having perspective.
Tricks to that.
Well, first of all, please email me and tell me all the tricks I'm missing. But I do just the typical stuff. I can pipe it out to the speakers in the lounge.
Nice.
Different speakers, different room.
Yeah.
Nothing to grab and change in there.
Yes.
So I'm just sitting down listening to music, and I always hear something different there. Even just hearing it through the other room helps me change my relationship to it, to more of just a listener and not it's not a patient on the table.
Right.
And
I was reading somewhere, I think, Shippin', right, in Nashville. He was saying there's this new app that you put on your master bus and you can stream it to your iPhone, which I guess is not too, but you can go anywhere, wherever your iPhone plugs in, and then you can just keep listening to it. Or you can just bounce it down either way, but that's kind of interesting. So, but getting that other perspective of walking out of the room and being somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess it's like going out to the car.
Yeah.
Right. That app reminds me of I guess Brian Eno and some of the German guys he was working with back in the 70s made they were working at a studio out in the countryside, and they made a radio transmitter where they could, because at the time, I don't know, maybe they could have just burned a cassette, played it in the car, but they could set it to just start at some random time, and they would just go out driving in the country, and at some point it would just come on, and that was kind of their way of like trying to just be caught off guard and hear it,
really
as
cool.
someone who's removed, and it's really tricky though. When you're sitting here listening and all these things are in front of you, sometimes you think that means you need to be changing something.
And you were talking about turning your screen off, which I think is an important point for the younger generation.
Yeah, and it's just having it off to the side and I'm not looking at it when I'm in the sweet spot is helpful. I mean, there's a lot of convenience to be said for having it right there, but instead I've got the Niagara Falls.
I know, that's so cool. And then you got Snoop and you got your Aratones and Pro X.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Representing. Man.
So, there's so much to talk about in the mix scenario, and we'll get back to that when we talk about some gear, but there's a couple of, and we call this segment On the Record for the show, bada bing, I always feel like the puns are there, but where we talk about a few of your recordings and some of the creative process that you kind of went through or discoveries you made during these albums that you worked on. And the first one that I wanted to ask about is the first My Morning Jacket record. And if people want to look that up, do you remember what year it was? And
by the first one, it was the first one that I worked on, which was called Circuital, and maybe 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to take it all in context, right? The band is coming from working with other teams. It's the first time you've met them. Maybe give us some background there.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I think they felt like, well, first of all, I feel like artists, when I work with well-established artists, they're usually reacting to whatever process they did last time.
Right.
And usually looking to consciously change something about that process. Not necessarily because they were unhappy with it, but because they want to keep it feeling fresh so that they don't feel like they're just doing the same thing over and over. In that case, My Morning Jacket had made a record where I think they felt like they really went for it as far as production and really, it was pretty meticulously produced and carefully put together. And so to react to that, I think Jim chose to create a set of circumstances that where that wasn't even an option.
Right, right.
So we made the record in a church in Louisville.
Oh, cool.
That's
actually what another question I was going to ask you is: you're not tracking? You're tracking here most of the time, but once in a while you'll go track remotely, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I rarely go to other studios because I have this place, you know. But if we want to be in a church in Louisville or a barn or something, you know, you've just got to go there.
And did you just pick this, or did they have this church in mind?
Jim had a good friend who was the assistant on that project who had kind of had an in at this church, and the church didn't have much going on, and so they just were giving him a deal of just kind of having the run of the place. It was a massive place, and so we, you know, brought mostly Jim's and our friend Kevin, who was the assistant, their gear in there at Studer 820, and no, it was 827, and you know, I brought some mics and outboard, and we had just like a pretty crappy little console to listen back on. I was sitting on the stage. There was a stage at the end of the kind of gymnasium type room. So, you know, they're a pretty loud band, and they were all just playing together in the room, everything bleeding into everything else.
Yeah.
Really no way to fix anything.
Sure.
And not to mention, it was even hard to like critically hear all the sounds.
I was going to ask, like, how did you choose where to place the room mics? That would have been.
I mean, every mic was a room mic,
right.
But for the true room mics, we just went as far away as we could. There was a balcony. We put some mics up there. But that's
cool.
You know, that was great, and it took an adjustment. It was kind of maddening at first for somebody who basically spends every day being able to control things. You know, put people in different rooms. Okay, you get the big sounding room. You're in the tight room.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
If I want more electric guitar, then I'm only turning up the electric guitar and not the
But you did have some
drums.
closed mics.
I definitely had closed mics, but the room was so reverberant, and they played so loud that, you know, nothing was truly isolated.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about, I mean, the vocal mic was definitely a drum room mic. But that was really fun. Like, once you kind of get acclimated and once we embraced it, and then we went to Blackbird actually to mix it there on the Neve. And so that was a great best of both worlds where, you know, we showed up there, and that was kind of the first time we really even knew for sure what we had, because doing playback in the church was also reverberant and
same space.
You know, it was just insane, and we didn't have, like, no computers were allowed in the building. That was our own rule.
Yeah.
So we weren't, you know, we weren't really like listening to the stuff outside of there. And
wow, man, that's cool.
But that was a fun process. So
experiment,
and I feel like that the record has a really unique identity as a result. And Jim and I just share that sensibility of wanting. I think probably most people want this, but just you want to make a record that just feels really unique unto itself, you know. And, that feels harder and harder to do these days, because so many records have been made, and everyone's using the same tools, and you know, and that's great, but innovation and originality needs to somehow persist.
I agree.
So,
I agree. Well,
we keep
I like
looking
it that
for
you're
ways.
away from all the major centers, so you don't get rubbed off. You know, the stuff. Engineer talking to engineer. I think you probably have your own creative space here up in Portland, so that's a good thing. You know.
Yeah, I had a phone conversation recently with an A&R guy from a major label on a project I was working on, and it was just such a culture clash. He was just micromanaging everything, and I thought, man, I've been so insulated from all this stuff.
Yeah, but so there's goods and bads. So actually, I was going to ask you, because your wife was involved in a pretty cool project, and of course, your wife has 9 records out. That's pretty. I was checking out some of her videos.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Do you guys do? And you play? Do you play drums sometimes?
I do.
On that stuff.
I mostly play on her records.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've roped some of my favorite drummers in a couple times, but
that number must be cool too. You get to cast.
It's really cool. But Yeah, even though they're all way better drummers than me,
Right.
we've just found that there's just kind of a chemistry where creatively we seem to bring the best out in each other.
Well, I was going to ask about the album she was on with Neko Case and Katie Lang, and how did that came about. And honestly, I was going to tie that into a question about, since you have really three distinct famous voices, the vocal chains, and how did you figure all that out, and how they were going to blend together and all that? You know, maybe you could talk about that while you talk about that record. But
that was that, you know, first of all, it was just a total thrill to be asked to do it.
Yeah.
But then that quickly turned a little scary, because I thought, for one, this is actually a pretty big challenge to take these three personalities.
Yes.
And make it all sound natural together.
Sure.
They've never really played together, or have some things in common, and in other ways they're from pretty different musical worlds.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, if I screw this up, like if those three get together and make a record that's not good, that's all gonna fall on me.
That's true, actually.
But you know, a huge part of the trick with that was getting the material. And
so those were outside songs?
no, it wasn't. They weren't outside songs. They wrote them together, but they all live in different places, and they all have very different songwriting processes and sensibilities.
Wow.
And it wasn't easy for them to all kind of get to that place where they all signed off, and then figure out who's going to take the lead on what.
Wow, that is.
It was it was quite an undertaking, but in the end, I'm really psyched with how it went.
No,
but,
it's great, man.
you know, did you already mention that I'm married to Laura? So
Yes.
living with one of the artists,
Living with one of the artists.
and producing the record, I definitely was privy to the ups and downs of the process. But once that was a case of a lot of preparation, like a couple years off and on of everyone getting together, writing, you know, being psyched, being bummed, being psyched again, and then.
So did it finally happen here?
It happened here, and we did all the basic tracking in 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when I was vocal chains, you're not necessarily worrying about that, or does someone like, you know, Katie Lang, because you'd worked with Neko before, but does she just come in and say, this is my go-to mic, this is my go-to pre, and that's what I've always done?
To an extent, yes. She has a U87 that she shows up with that does sound fantastic on her voice. And occasionally, if we wanted something a little bigger sounding, with just a little darker and maybe a little bigger low end, we used my U47.
Okay.
But Neko always sings into an Audio-Technica 4050.
Wow.
That's just like...
Let that be a lesson. You can buy an inexpensive microphone.
That's right.
That's the tube. That's the tube.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's solid state.
It's not. And there's something about it that she loves. One thing is that it won't really distort, and she feels like Neumann's will distort when she gets loud. And we did actually I got her to sing into the 47 on a couple of songs.
Oh, that's good.
And it went fine, but there's something that feels like home for her on Audio-Technica. So that made that decision easy. And Laura, I have a U87 that Klaus Heine modified ages ago. That's sort of always been the go-to for her, although on her new record, we branched out a bit. And there were a few lead vocals or backup vocals on that record that we did with the RCA 44.
Wow.
Because I'm just a huge fan of it. And
so are you talking then adding some top gain, or not even, or just leaving it dark? And
you know, in some cases, not even adding top.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I know in my mind, I think of it as such a dark mic, but every once in a while, when I put it up on the right voice and the right mix, you know, it has some top.
That's crazy.
It just depends if the track is super bright, and there's lots of bright stuff going on, it might not cut. But
I read, I don't know if you know Russ Long in Nashville, but
he
cut some of those sixpence none the richer vocals on a Coles 4038, And I was like, how did you do that? They sound so bright and airy. But, well, you know.
Yeah, no,
flat.
I've learned that too. Those they can be good vocal mics, but it's kind of counterintuitive.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a short break and be back for, well, I'd say our final segment, at least sitting here, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of studio tour and talking. But we'll see you here in just a second. Producer's Room. See you guys soon.